Monroe Doctrine.
So is that what you would say, that we're in the business of nation building now?
We're in the business of having countries around us that are viable and successful, and where the oil is allowed to freely come out because that's good, it gets the prices down. That's good for our country.
Once upon a time, there was a Monroe. Don't confuse it with the other rather famous Monroe, but someone who left quite an impact. Almost 200 years after he articulated a "don't bother me and I won't bother you" deal or doctrine with Europe, the man, a former US president, continues to be relevant. And as we speak, is reshaping the world right in front of our eyes. I'm Abhishek Singh and you're watching the Hindustan Times. In this video, I will break down the Monroe or Monroe Doctrine as Donald Trump calls it, the implications for other Latin American countries after Maduro's capture, and what does this mean for the rest of the world. I am talking about James Monroe. The Monroe Doctrine, as it came to be known later, was his idea. First articulated in 1823, more than 200 years ago. Although the doctrine was named after him, it was heavily influenced and drafted by his Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams. In a nutshell, the Monroe Doctrine sets in place a mechanism through which he sought to establish and assert American dominance in the Western Hemisphere by warning European powers against new colonization or interference in the Americas, in exchange for US neutrality in European affairs. Fast forward 200 years. Look at these pictures. This is the Monroe Doctrine's final step. The Monroe Doctrine has rolled back into headlines. Donald Trump is using it to justify a harder line in America's backyard. As I told you earlier, the doctrine began in 1823 when US President James Monroe told Europe, "Stay out of the Western Hemisphere." The doctrine proposed 4 key ideas. Number 1, the US would not interfere in European wars. Number 2, it would accept existing European colonies. Number 3, would block any new colonization in the Americas and would treat any European move to control a state in the hemisphere as a hostile act. US adherence to the Monroe Doctrine turned the US into a self-declared protector of the Americas, justifying interventions from the Caribbean to Central America in the name of keeping outsiders out. The critics see it less as a shield and more as a license for US hegemony. Trump seems to be rather fond of the idea. 200 years after it was first articulated, the Monroe Doctrine was mentioned in Trump's national security strategy, not as a thing of the past, but as a policy move his administration intends to follow in the years to come. Now, why is it back in 2026? Now, you and I might find reviving a 200-year-old oppressive, hegemonic doctrine absurd, but the rising competition with China and Russia in Latin America has put the doctrine back on the table. Interestingly, Trump chose to assert the doctrine while the Chinese were literally in Caracas, Venezuela's capital. Hours before the US strike, they were shaking hands with Maduro. Washington's latest national security strategy openly recenters the Western Hemisphere as a highest priority and talks about a Trump Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine that opposes hostile foreign control of key assets in the region. At the same time, as China has become a major investor and lender across Latin America, and Russia and Iran are the others looking for security and energy footholds in the region, this is feeding US fears of encirclement close to home. All of this gives political space for a tougher line framed not as new aggression, but as a return to an old, supposedly defensive tradition. Donald Trump is leaning on the Monroe Doctrine to explain and justify the dramatic US operation that captured Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro and installed a transitional authority tied closely to Washington. In briefings and posts, he has branded his approach the Monroe Doctrine, presenting it as a modern update that allows the US not just to stop foreign powers in the region, but to directly manage a crisis country until a safe, proper, and judicious transition is achieved. Trump argues that Venezuela was hosting foreign adversaries, acquiring offensive weapons, and expropriating US oil assets, making it a textbook case for a hardened Monroe-style response. By doing this, he connects military action, regime change, and control over Venezuela's vast oil reserves to a 200-year-old doctrine, turning a controversial intervention into something presented as long-standing US policy. Now let's take a look at what this means for the rest of the world. For Latin American countries, this revival signals a more assertive US willing to intervene, apply economic pressure, condition aid to push out travel powers, and secure governments that align with Washington. Regional leaders now worry that their sovereignty, especially over energy, ports, and telecoms, could be squeezed between US demands to cut adversarial influence and their own economic need for Chinese or other investment. For Europe and Asia, a hardened Monroe Doctrine means clearer American red lines in the Western Hemisphere, but also an expectation that other great powers accept US primacy there while the US contests their influence in places like the Indo-Pacific. That could deepen great power rivalry as Russia, China and others push back against what they see as US double standards. Spheres of influence for America, but not for anybody else. So when Trump talks about the Monroe or Monroe Doctrine today, it is not just historical nostalgia. It is a signal that the US is ready to act as Uncle Sam again, the undisputed guardian of the Western Hemisphere. The real question at this point in time for the rest of the world is whether this revival stabilizes America's backyard or drags the region and its rivals into a new era of confrontation in the name of an old idea. If you liked watching this video, don't forget to like and share.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest newsmakers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.